The top business stories live from the Sky News City studio. Pubs giant Wetherspoon says it will be investing more into its pubs as inflationary pressures ease. Shares surge at Marks & Spencer after half-year profits smash city forecasts. And why UK holidaymakers are now the #1 target for Portugal as it continues to recover from the pandemic. Good afternoon, this is Business Live with me, Ian King. The pub operator Wetherspoon said today that inflationary pressures were easing as it reported an increase in investment this financial year. The company, which is currently trading from 816 pubs, said it will invest £70 million this year, up from just under £47 million in the last financial year, with areas of investment including new staff rooms, changing rooms, air conditioning and glass racks above bars to cater for increased usage of brewers' branded glasses. The measure that strips out new openings and refurbishments were up 9.5% on the same period last year. And joining me now, I'm very pleased to say, is Tim Martin, the founder and chief executive of Wetherspoon. Tim, welcome to you.
Thanks, Ian.
Like-for-like's up 9.5% in the quarter. How much of that is volume and how much is price?
I actually don't know the answer to that question, but if I did, I'm not sure I could reveal it. But I think it's probably a little bit of both. But we've tried not to put our prices up too much.
Yeah.
And have generally adopted a policy of keeping them low and going for volume. So I will emphasise the volume aspect.
Very good. I mean, has the sales mix changed appreciably between food and drink?
It changed over the years. We floated on the stock market in 1992. Food was 5% of sales, and I think sales were £12,000 per week per pub, including everything. Now sales are over £50,000 per pub per week, and food is around £23,000 per week per pub. So food is double what the entire pub sales were 30 years ago. That comes from our department of difficult to understand statistics.
You make the point in the statement, though, that inflationary pressures are easing. Has the inflationary dragon been completely slain?
I don't think it has, and I don't think anyone knows for sure. Unemployment we've had in our careers, and you've got quite a lot of geopolitical trouble. So it's very, very difficult to say. High government expenditure as well. Who knows where that casserole will end up?
But do you think, I mean, these are quite interesting numbers given that the consumer, and we've heard from the likes of Marks & Spencer today as well, are people overdoing the doom and gloom a bit out there as regards consumer health?
As for this moment, I would say yes. I mean, we're in a weird situation because whenever we've had the type of economic problems you've got at the moment in the past, we've had unemployment shooting up, and it hasn't this time. So we are in a novel situation. But it seems that people are still prepared to go out for a pint or a meal, and they may even be prepared to buy a car or two. So, so who knows what the consumer is up to?
Are you seeing appreciably different trading patterns around the country?
No. Strangely enough, we haven't much seen that in our careers ever. The City of London trades pretty well like the City of Newcastle or outlying. A lot of people do find a big difference, but not us so much. Occasionally there is a bit of a difference.
Yeah, so you've announced this big step up in CapEx this financial year. What's informed that?
Well, it's the 70 million we were talking about is in existing pubs, an increase in existing pubs. And I think it's just realising that pubs are getting a bit older and pubs always need to move along. So I think staff rooms, for example, are a good benefit for staff. No British pubs in history have had them. The people that are the much maligned McDonald's. They've got staff rooms in their pub. So we've copied them. If in doubt, copy McDonald's.
Yeah, it's not a bad mantra, that, isn't it?
No.
What about the size of the estate? Quarter. Is that because just you're letting go of leaseholds that aren't competitive?
If we've made a mistake over the years in some locations where we're better off with one, so in quite a lot of locations around the country, we've gone from 2 pubs to 1, and where we've been able to, we've enlarged the remaining pub as well. We think that works a bit better for us.
Are you still coming across sites that are attractive for you?
And yes, I've got to be careful not to go near them myself. I never inspect sites beforehand because I buy everything. So yeah, but there are still quite a lot of places we could go. Behind you is a picture of St. Paul's. We haven't got a pub there. If we had one, it could be a good site, and so on.
Obviously, there's a lot of anxiety in the hospitality sector about wage.
We have got no labour shortages whatsoever, and haven't. Straight after the pandemic, you had a very strange time. Retired, etc. And we found, I spoke to a pub manager near one of our pubs, which is next to a university, and she said, I've got students coming in who don't want to work evenings or weekends. It's all very weird. That's all changed, and people now are getting back to normal. It has quite a psychological effect if you lock people up for a long time.
For sure, yeah. I mean, in terms of the hybrid working thing, I mean, it feels as though life is getting back to normal on that front. Are you doing better business in the city centres than you were this time last year?
Well, strangely enough, everything about the pandemic has been unpredictable. One of the things that people said is that city centres would be quiet and the suburbs would be busy. It was the opposite in most of the country. People were stuck in the suburbs in their house. They went into the city centre on a night out because they hadn't commuted. So we're seeing that. Thanks, Ian. Thank you.
Some other stories now, and some good news from the high street, because shares of Marks & Spencer have surged by as much as 10% today after the retailer reported half-year profits that smashed city forecasts. M&S reported a pre-tax profit before adjustments of £360.2 million for the 6 months to the end of September. That was up from £105.5 million in the same period last year, and well ahead of city forecasts, which were around £275 million. Well, M&S said that its food sales during the period rose by 14.7% and up by 11.7% on a like-for-like basis. The measure, of course, strips out the impact of openings, closures and refurbishments. Clothing and home sales were up by 5.7% and by 5.5%. Has also, as promised, reinstated its dividend for the first time since the pandemic. In a London lawsuit by investors that it actively pursued Iranian business as part of an industrial-scale breach of sanctions. Lawyers for the FTSE 100 lender had tried to strike out claims that its sanctions violations and then it admitted to US regulators in 2019. Well, that deal extended a deferred prosecution agreement reached in 2012 that saw Standard Chartered pay US authorities $667 million. But investors argue the sanctions busting went further than admitted. Well, the High Court ruled today that investors were entitled to make the allegations and that those allegations should be tested at a civil trial. And the Lloyds of London insurance market said today it will invest £40 million in development projects in regions affected by the slave trade in the 18th and 19th centuries. Lloyds will also invest a further £12 million on a programme to help black and ethnically diverse talent find and access careers in the insurance industry, which will include bursaries for black university students. Well, the news comes 3 years after the Atlantic slave trade. Now, as we reported earlier this week, the great and good of the international travel and tourism sector have been attending World Travel Market London, one of the biggest annual get-togethers for the industry. Among them, tourism, commerce and services in Portugal, which last year attracted 2.1 million visitors from the UK. I began by asking him about visitor numbers to Portugal and whether they're back to pre-pandemic levels.
We are already, according to UNWTO, we are expecting, UNWTO expects to have this year 90 to 95% of the international tourism demand, but Portugal has already reached those numbers. We are having this year the best 9 months ever in the history of tourism. % in terms of arrivals and more than 36% of tourism revenues. Actually, already in the figures of pre-pandemics. So Portugal is doing a great performance in terms of tourism, and we have already achieved it and exceeded the numbers of pre-pandemic.
And what proportion of visitors coming to Portugal are from the UK?
UK market, it represents around almost 20% of our tourism demand. Already more 5% in terms of overnights and more 9% of guests coming from pandemic levels. Even in UK, we have more tourists when comparing with 2019, which was the best year of tourism in Portugal.
What proportion of visitors come to the main era?
The main destination for Britons in Portugal, it's the Algarve, which represents around 50% of the tourism demand, and then we have Madeira with around 20%. But I should mention that we are growing in all the. They are growing. Britons are discovering our country in different regions, and that's good because one of our strategy is to show all the country. We have the major big destinations like Algarve, Lisboa, Porto, and Madeira, but we are spreading our tourism demand in all the country, and British people are discovering the country in all the regions.
I understand you're doing quite a lot of work to attract visitors outside the main summer peak. What sort of things are you doing?
Yeah, first of all, we are developing other offers in terms of tourism. For example, the wine tourism. Wine tourism in several destinations of the inland. Oldest wine demarcated region in the world, and we are developing the wine tourism. Also, Portugal is it's considered the best surf destination in Europe, and we are having. So we are providing several experiences in all over the country.
You had some very bad forest fires in August. I understand you're putting a lot of money into rebuilding the tourism sector. How much is that costing the government?
Actually, in Portugal this summer, comparing with other summers, it was not. The fireworks were in 1-2 municipalities. It's not so significant. Atlantic country, it's not so significant, the fireworks. All over the year.
Now, in 2011, 2012, you introduced a golden visa scheme whereby non-EU foreigners could buy property in Portugal for €500,000, and that gave them residency people post-Brexit. Why have you just decided to abolish that?
Portugal is an attractive country for measure in a certain period, but now Portugal is according to to foreign direct investment, and even according to Ernst & Young, in 2022, Portugal was the 6th country in Europe with the highest number of foreign investment projects. Approach. It was important in a certain period. Portugal still a very country open to business, open to investment, but it's not necessary to have the golden visa measure anymore.
Will it affect the residency rights of British people who've already taken out these visas?
So the thing is that of what we have done till now, the guarantees, the rights, they are guaranteed. It's something that we have guaranteed in this context. In the visible, what more in what we have give, what we done. It was also guaranteed. It's only for new visas that the measure was not anymore in courts.
The Tourism Secretary of Portugal, and I should point out we actually recorded that interview yesterday very shortly before the Prime Minister. We'll have a look at how the markets have finished up this Wednesday afternoon. Don't go away.
Fly Emirates, fly better.
Well, stocks in Europe have enjoyed gains as the session's gone on. Here's how the main continental European indices have. Well, highlights today include Pandora, the world's biggest jewellery maker and retailer. Shares there ahead by some 9% in Copenhagen. That's after it raised its full-year sales forecasts. Well, here in London, the FTSE 100's finished very slightly lower, pared back gains from earlier in the session. Consumer stocks did well, but I think some of the energy heavyweights have dragged on the index. In terms of the leading blue-chip gainers, well, Marks & Spencer led the way, up. On broker comment. To the downside, both Centrica and SSE are lower on oil and gas prices coming off the. Over on Wall Street, trading's been mixed this afternoon. The Nasdaq's low. I think the S&P 500 is just about in positive territory right now. Talking points today include Roblox. The share's up there 18% after its quarterly results have proved better than expected. But to the downside, Warner Brothers Discovery has been taking an absolute hammering, off by as much as 16%. Following a disappointing trading update during which it cited the ongoing actors' strikes in Hollywood. On the foreign exchange markets, it's pretty quiet just now ahead of a speech tonight from Jay Powell, the chair of the US Federal Reserve. Pound regaining some of the losses against the dollar early on in the session. Meanwhile, the oil price, well, that too has pared back some of its earlier losses. At one point today, it was at its lowest level since the 24th of July, but a barrel of Brent crude currently changing hands at 80. Start with M&S have really spectacular numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think actually there's been a lot of scepticism around generally retail turnaround stories, and Marks and Spencer's is absolutely one of those names that has defied all market expectations. I think there's a couple of elements to it. I mean, the consumer has definitely held up and been. But I think there's a bit of a self-help story there that is played out better than expectations as well. You know, they've really managed to execute on those cost-cutting, the cost savings that they intended to, and I really attracted the consumer. So that dynamic and then their ability to really benefit from that operational leverage, that top line being strong and their lean cost base coming through has really continued to surprise and beat market.
Oh, haven't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in a market where the fight and battle against a tight or not, it's around price, quality, service, and yeah, they've managed to hit it spot on.
The other thing that Stuart Machin, the CEO, and his colleagues have been doing, though, which strikes me as being very impressive in the current climate, is the way that they're shifting the store estate around. They're closing uncompetitive sites, but they're not afraid to open up where they see an opportunity.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's all around profitability. You've got to have that lean cost base and be best and where the footfall is going to be and where you can target that consumer and target.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's the good news today. I mean, on the downside, ITV was pretty disappointing.
Yeah, and I think that actually highlights brilliant, and I think most people expected, but there are definitely pockets where there is less resiliency and companies are cutting back and being more cautious against what could be a tougher backdrop, and marketing and advertising spend tend to be areas that are hit first. I guess on the other side, you've also got the writers' strikes, which has impacted the studio over at Wall Street, as well as you mentioned on the Warner Street side.
Yeah, absolutely extraordinary. Now, let's get back to some good news. What about the oil?
Dynamic, and it's really very evolving. You know, earlier this year we've had we then had concerns around the Middle East tensions that elevated the share price, elevated the oil price. That sort of started to come back a little bit against the demand backdrop, where we're consistent. So I think the question around how that demand impacts the demand for oil is being questioned. And then there's a bit of nervousness in the US as well around this sort of uptake of demand into winter.
Very good, though, if it stays at these sort of levels in terms of the global inflationary outlook.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, it's
as ever, we've got to leave it there, I'm afraid. Thanks for coming in today. That's it from me. I'm back again tomorrow at 11:30 with the morning edition of Business Live. Hope very much to see you then. In the meantime, do stay tuned. Coming up after this short break, it's the News Hour.